Hello and welcome to game 94 of TCEC's 15th Superfinal, played between Stockfish and Leela Chess 0. Now I know the Superfinal is over, but I've been benched by a cold in the last couple of days and I didn't get the chance to review the final games. But now I'm back and I wanted to review this game 94 because it was just another ruthless suffocation in a slightly controversial opening. So let's see what happened in this game. If this sounds weird, then it's probably not the mic's fault, it's my voice. They started with d4, d5, and now after knight f3, knight c6, the Chigorin variation of the queen's pawn game, which after c4 will transpose into the Chigorin defense. Now why is this knight c6 move a little bit dubious? Well, it blocks in the c pawn. White usually puts a lot of pressure on the d5 pawn with c4 and knight c3. And black is required in many cases to defend d5 with c6 or defend it with e6, and after d5 is adequately defended, break in the center with c5. This is black's main equalizing move in these d4, d5 openings. But with the knight on c6, neither c6 or c5 is possible. However, the move is not completely crazy because black has other ideas. He is anticipating c4 coming, and after these pawns exchange themselves, either on d5 or c4, black wants to attack the d4 pawn with the knight, with the queen, and even with e5. And indeed, after knight c6, Leela now continued with c4, which is the most aggressive move in the position, building pressure against d5. Stockfish continued with e6, knight c3, and now bishop b4, pinning this knight and reducing pressure on d5. Normally, in the Chigorin defense, after white castles and this pin is broken, black is required even to give up his bishop in order to alleviate the pressure on d5. The game continued with bishop g5, knight e7, e3, and now f6, driving this bishop back. Bishop f4 and now even g5. Black is winning some time with tempo on the bishop, but as we know, pawns don't move backwards. Stockfish, of course, is aware of that rule, but still Leela thinks this position is a 1.6 advantage for white. Stockfish now continued with knight f5 and Leela played bishop d3, anticipating black's next move, which is h5. Stockfish here quite simply is threatening to play h4 and trap the bishop on g3. And usually white in this position would be forced to play h3 or h4 to prevent trapping the bishop, and then black can take out that bishop with the knight, forcing f takes on g3, ruining white's structure and making e4 slightly weak. So the bishop's role on d3 now is to take out this knight, and after the pawn recaptures, white can now play h4, and after g4 and knight d2, the bishop has survived and white's pawn structure is intact, and the bishop also has the f4 square. But Leela didn't care, and after h5, instead of taking the knight on f5, she played h4, allowing this knight to take on g3. And this makes me wonder if this bishop f5 idea is even best in this position, since Leela played h4 here. And as we'll see, after knight takes and f takes on g3, white also has trumps, because once this king gets castled, he will have a very safe square on h2. The game continued with bishop takes, pawn takes, and now g4. Taking on h4 is not very good, because after knight takes, black doesn't have an attack. The g6 square is accessible for both the knight and the bishop, and the h5 pawn is blocked, and after white castles, this rook on the f-file will be a monster. So instead of that, Stockfish played here g4 and now knight g1. This knight is going to e2 and from there probably to f4 to attack h5, g6, e6 and d5. Stockfish, of course, would like to make his king safe via long castle, so he has ideas like queen e7 and bishop d7, but playing queen e7 here in this position doesn't work because of the c takes and e takes. f4 becomes an outpost for this knight. It cannot be challenged by a pawn anymore. And f5 and f6 are also weak. So instead of that, instead of queen e7, Stockfish preferred to have this pawn duo here on e6 and f6 for now. And he took on c4. Bishop takes, and now queen e7, knight e2. And here, bishop d7, castles, and now e5. Stockfish needs to undertake something in the center since the king side is blocked and he wants to castle queen side. And e5 is also denying f4 for that knight. The game continued with rook b1, long castle, and now Leela played queen a4, threatening to win immediately. Pause the video if you would like to find out yourself what Leela's move would be after something like rook a7, let's say. The move that Leela wants to make here is queen a6, quite simply threatening to mate on b7. And taking out the queen doesn't help because of the bishop a6. Black is mated with rook and bishop, very nice mate. And after queen a6, b6 is not possible because of the pin. And how else can black defend b7? Well, he could do it with the knight on a5, but this just drops the knight, quite simply. Or black could be a bit more cunning and play knight b4, making use of the fact that white can't take the knight on b4 yet, because the queen is hanging. But after queen a7, white is threatening again, mate on a8. And moving back the knight, of course, to block on b8 with the knight in case of queen a8 doesn't work, because white, of course, mates on b7. So after knight b4, the only other way for black is to play bishop c6 and make way for this king, but then this just drops the knight on b4 and white is winning. Stockfish wasn't interested though in all these nice variations, and after queen a4 he played king b8, and now if queen a6 comes, then b6 is possible. But instead of queen a6 now, Leela played calmly king h2. And this king is so safe on the h2 square. It's not only defended by g2, g3 and h4, but also by Stockfish's pawns on g4 and h5. These pawns prevent frontal attacks from the rooks and the queen. Stockfish now continued with king a8, and Leela played bishop d5, cheekily threatening again, mate in 5. Pause now if you would like to work it out yourself. I will even help you and tell you the first move of the sequence. Are you ready? It is rook takes on b7. After something again, of course, like rook h7. Rook takes on b7, and this leads to mate in every variation. If the king takes on b7, then white has rook b1 check, forcing the king away from c6. If he goes to c8, then he's mated immediately with queen a6. And if he goes to a8, then he's mated after queen takes on c6, bishop takes, and bishop takes on c6. And not taking the rook is not an option either, because then white will take on a7 with the rook, making use of the fact that the knight is pinned. And black will get mated after that with rook a8 and queen a6. So, after bishop d5, Stockfish played rook b8 to defend the pawn on b7, and now Leela continued with queen c2 to defend the knight on e2. If Stockfish ever takes on d4, then she plans on recapturing the e-pawn, therefore this knight needed defense. Stockfish now increased the pressure on the e5 with rook e8, but Leela played here e4. And this bishop and this pawn are defending each other very, very nicely. Stockfish now moved the rook to the e file to put pressure on d4 and d5. But Leela played rook f2, and after knight a5, just before Stockfish could put some pressure on the d file, she played rook f1. attacking f6 and forcing this rook back into the defense of the f6 pawn. The game continued with a4, and now Stockfish wants to play c5 to put pressure on d4, but before of that he plays c6 to drive this bishop back to a2, and now c5, but the bishop goes back to d5, a6, and instead of a6, taking on d4 is not really good, because after knight takes on d4, this knight gets some new squares, attacking all these squares, and the bishop, knight, and pawn are taking over the center of the board, basically. So after a6, Leela continued now with d takes on e5. She wants to invade with the rooks, f takes on e5, and now rook f7. Taking here is possible, but Stockfish preferred to play queen d6 and maintain the rooks. And Leela now continued with c4, solidifying this very important bishop on d5. Rook takes, and now bishop e8, attacking the rook, and rook h7, attacking the pawn on h5. Stockfish now played king a7, and Leela played queen c3, attacking the knight, which defends b7, knight c6, and now queen e3. Very, very strong move, attacking c5, and also threatening maybe rook a6, attacking the queen, and then maybe going to e6 with the rook, attacking the pawn on e5. Stockfish now continued with knight d4, which is a very nice square for that knight, but unfortunately it doesn't matter because black is just all tied up. With knight d4 he also uncovers this bishop's attack on a4, but doesn't matter. Leela just plays a5 here, and black is almost in zugzwang here. He doesn't have moves. This rook can move because the bishop and the rook are attacking b7. The king can move because then rook h6 comes with a mating threat on a6, helped by this bishop, which pins the pawn on b7. And black literally has no moves. Taking on e2 also doesn't help, because queen takes, king somewhere, and queen back to e3, and black's position is even worse. So after a5, being in zugzwang basically, Stockfish played now bishop c6, but this drops the pawn on h5, which Leela takes. And now queen c7, attacking the pawn on a5. And here in this position, Leela decides to exchange the knights, and after e takes on d4, she played queen e1 to defend the pawn on a5. Stockfish now continued with rook d8, and Leela decides to also exchange the bishops, and is basically forcing Stockfish to take back with the queen, since she's attacking also c5. And now rook d5. Taking this rook doesn't work, because after e takes on d5, this d pawn will promote. For example, the queen could go either to d7 to defend the pawn on g4, or to c7 to attack a5, but it doesn't matter. Leela's response is the same. Queen e6, basically helping this pawn to become a queen. For example, queen a5, d6, and nothing can stop this pawn. Leela can even allow this pawn to promote, and all that thanks to her king, which is so safe here. This king is like sitting in a theater box enjoying the show in a loge. You can't bother that king. The game could continue with d3, d7, queen e8, queen e8, and even if this black pawn becomes a queen, Leela is still winning after queen e7, and she will get a new queen. So after rook d5, instead of taking the rook, Stockfish preferred to play here rook e8, but now Leela just quite simply pushes this pawn up the board, and she wants to queen it. The game continued with queen c7, but now e6. Stockfish at this point blocks the pawn with rook e7, but now Leela plays queen e4, attacking the g4 pawn. And this also allows Stockfish to take on a5, but that would be a huge blunder because after queen takes on a5, Leela would have rook d7, and because of the mating threat on b7, Stockfish would be pretty much forced to take the rook, and after e takes d7, this pawn will become a new queen. So after queen e4, Stockfish played instead queen c6 to attack this pawn twice. But Leela played queen f4, inviting Stockfish to take the pawn, and indeed after rook takes on e6, Leela would have a rook d8 threatening mate on b8, and nothing can stop that, only putting pieces on prey on d6. And instead taking with the queen, now this is a bit better because after rook d8, black would have at least queen e5, not allowing this queen to go to b8, but here Leela would have queen f8, and again nothing can stop mate on a8, only putting pieces on prey, or maybe playing b6, but then black gets mated on c8 with the queen. So after queen f4, Stockfish played here queen c8 to guard the back rank, and he's still attacking e6 twice, and Leela is not defending it. But it doesn't matter because now Leela played rook d6 to not allow Stockfish to capture with the queen, and after rook takes, she played now queen takes on g4, basically attacking that rook twice and forcing it to go back to e8. And now after the queen exchange and rook d7, the game is basically over. After Stockfish's next move, rook g8, the game was ended in Leela's favor. And indeed Leela is completely winning. The d pawn is stopped by the rook. The b pawn is also pinned, it cannot advance. And the pawns on the king side will just win the game for white. Another superb game by Leela. She was maybe helped by the Chigorin defense, which is, I mentioned, slightly controversial, but at least at this level, probably is. But still a beautiful game in which she denied counterplay again, and she just grinded until Stockfish basically got into zugzwang, and he had to give up the pawn on h5. And she won not only this game but also the tournament with a +7 score, which against Stockfish is absolutely unbelievable. Is Leela the best chess playing engine at this point? I think it is, because she also won the last CCCC event against Stockfish, Antifish and Liebenstein. So I think we can safely claim now that Leela is finally the best chess entity there is available at this point. At least I think it is. Please subscribe, like and share, and check out some of the other games. Thanks for watching and see you soon. Bye bye.